can't hear you, but I trust you'll be offering obeisances, as I will. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So I'm very happy to be back on the Scarborough link here, my old friend Ananda Gauranga, and all of you also. So today we're going to be studying, as Ananda was describing, the Sadhu-sangastaka. Now, you won't find that in the literature. This is something that I noticed, that there happen to be 8 verses here on the importance and the great value of associating with sadhus or devotees. And this is right near the beginning of his instructions to his mother, and they're very important. So before I begin, we'll have the traditional, you can respond. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. So we're going to chant these verses in response. You're muted, but I think we can do it. Beginning with text 20 of the 25th chapter of the 3rd canto. And this is, as mentioned, this is Lord Kapiladeva. And as you can probably see on your screens also, this is his near the beginning of his teachings to his mother, Devahuti. So also you say, Prasangam Madhuram Pasham Atmanak Kavayo Viduhu Sa Eva Sadhu Shukuto Mokshadvaramapavatam. Oh, I'm sorry. Uh-oh. Let's see. Oh, I see the problem. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Translation. Every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. But that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. Now, I put this one into a little poem. This is the only one, but you may enjoy it. Mundane attachment keeps us tied to birth and death infernal, but love for sadhus opens wide the doors to life eternal. Now, we're not going to read all the purports because they'll get too long, but I pulled out some of the main points, and we can discuss them. So the first point Prabhupada makes is that attachment is inherent in the soul. Quote, attachment cannot be killed, it has simply to be transferred. The attachment for material things is called material consciousness, and attachment for Krishna or his devotee is called Krishna consciousness. So attachment is inherent in the soul because we're originally in the spiritual world, and we're part and parcel of Krishna, and we have this intimate relationship with him in one of the 5 main rasas. And that relationship is different ways of expressing loving exchange. And that love is simply another way of describing intense attachment. So this attachment, unfortunately, when we turn away from Krishna and we come to the material world, this attachment is directed toward material things or other conditioned souls and material bodies. And this attachment and enjoyment in trying to enjoy those relationships is actually the source of our continued entanglement in this material world. So how to get out of this entanglement, this trap? Oftentimes these different attachments are described as ropes in the heart, or really a grunta. And those ropes are bind us birth after birth after birth to this material world. So the whole process of bhakti is to turn that attachment, systematically turn that attachment toward Krishna, back toward Krishna where it belongs, and which will bring us complete happiness and take us to the spiritual world. So in order to do that, we need to associate with a sadhu. And that's why this it is said in the previous verse that those who are wise understand that the same attachment that we have for things and beings in this world needs to be directed toward the sadhu. We're too covered to direct it directly to Krishna, but Krishna is so kind that he sends sadhus, which we'll learn their qualities in a minute, of course, the devotees, who can train us to turn our attachments and turn our affection and attachment to Krishna. So then the next question is, if we have to associate with the sadhu, who is the sadhu? So Prabhupada describes one who unflinchingly engages in devotional service as a sadhu, and this we'll see in a couple of verses. Then he describes Mahatma and sadhu. When Prabhupada would refer to sadhu, he would almost always quote that verse from the Bhagavad Gita. The second and third lines. Those who worship me undeviatingly, ananya bhak, what should understand their sadhus. And this particular verse from the Gita says, even if they sometimes you see they may deviate a little bit, but if they're unflinchingly devoted to Krishna, they should be considered sadhus. And how does the benefit of association with the sadhu? First of all, attachment for Krishna or his devotee leads to liberation. And that attachment for Krishna can be furthered and reawakened in us only through the association of the sadhu. And then in the point D here, it explains why. The reason is that a sadhu would teach us about devotional service, which automatically brings liberation. This is the great gifts of sadhu sangha. And just to point out at this point, at the beginning, how this is such an important topic that throughout the Bhagavatam, we hear about the importance of association with sadhus or with devotees. There's one verse that appears practically identically 3 times in the Bhagavatam. And you know that it's important when it repeats, and especially 3 times. The first time is in the first canto, 18th chapter, text number 13. And it's identical verse exactly identical appears in 4th canto, 30th chapter, text 34, and was a slight deviation in 4th canto, 24th chapter, text 57. So I'll read the one at 1813. And what we have is there, Tuliyama lavenapi naswargam napunarbhavam bhagavat sangi sangasya marchanam kimutashisha. Which means, a moment's association with the devotee of the Lord, sadhu, is so valuable that it cannot be compared even with the attainment of the heavenly planets or liberation from matter. What to speak of such worldly benedictions as material prosperity, which are for those who are meant for death. So this is the first verse here describes the importance of turning our attachment toward the sadhu. And now we're going to learn what are those qualities of a sadhu. So I'll say, you say. Tatikshava karunika sudidaksa vadehinam ajata shakta vakshanta sadhavak sadhubhushanaha. Which means, the symptoms of a sadhu are that he is tolerant, merciful, and friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies. He is peaceful. He abides by the scriptures, and all his characteristics are sublime. So, points from the purport. The first thing is a sadhu is a preacher of Krishna consciousness. And therefore, he must be tolerant because he or she will meet with all kinds of opposition. Must be compassionate because empathy with the suffering of others is the main impetus to preach. And there's some examples of merciful, tolerant preachers Prabhupada gives. Haridas Thakur, of course, Nityananda Prabhu, Jesus Christ, Prahlad Maharaj is another. A sadhu is the friend of all living entities, even the cats and dogs, what to speak of the cows, and he has enmity toward no one. And 3, he is peaceful and abides by the scriptural injunctions. And most important, he's a devotee of the Lord, and that will come up in the next verse. So we find, I was just reading, I happened to be reading chapter 15 of the Madhya Lila, and it's a beautiful chapter, part of it in which Lord Chaitanya is glorifying his different devotees. And one Vasudev Dutt, this is where Vasudev Dutt asks to have all the sinful reactions of all the living entities in the universe transferred to him, and that he can suffer perpetually, and so that they can be free and go back to God. And When Lord Chaitanya hears this, he starts crying. His heart is moved so much. And he embraces Vasudeva Dutt, and he explains there that this is the ideal heart of a real Vaishnava. And we see this reflected in Srila Prabhupada, of course, and Prahlad Maharaj in his prayers to Lord Nrsingadeva. There's two prayers. I won't chant the whole one, but you know, Naivod Vijay Padatadotya Vaitaranyas, and the next one, Prayena Devamunayosova Mukti Kama, where he's saying near the end of his prayers there that I have absolutely no trouble. I'm not in any difficulty. I'm not at all disturbed. Whenever I want, I can chant your glories and immerse my heart and my consciousness in ecstasy, Mahamrita Magna Chitta, great nectar ocean. But I am lamenting for these fools and rascals, the conditioned souls who have turned away from you and trying to enjoy Maya Sukhaya, flickering happiness, and suffering like anything. I'm not going to be like those personalists who leave the cities, wander away into the secluded places like the mountains and the caves and forests, simply desiring their own liberation from birth and death. This is ultimately, he calls it Svamukti Kama. It's a type of lust, a type of material desire. I'm going to, Prabhupada gives in his purport, I'm going to stay in the crowded cities and preach even though there's so much trouble, because I can see there's no one but you who can help them, and I have to be there to give them you. He's speaking to Lord Nrsingadeva, of course. So this is exactly the mood of all the great preachers. Lord Chaitanya himself took so much trouble traveling in South India, throughout India, and teaching chanting of the holy name. Nityananda Prabhu went out, even though he was insulted and even injured by Madai and Jagai Madai, he persisted and delivered them. So this is that's why Titikshava have to be tolerant and karunika, because expressing that mercy or that compassion means you go out, you take the trouble, as Srila Prabhupada did to come to America and for 12 years, so much trouble. So that's the first quality, those two qualities, Titikshava karunika, Suridak Sarva Dehinam, friend of all living entities, and that includes cows and cats and dogs and everyone, even insects. And he's peaceful and abides by the scriptural injunctions. So how does one become peaceful? Become completely devoid of any material desire. This is right there in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Dihaya kama neksavan pumam chadati nixpahan nimamo namahankara sashanti madhikachiti. One who is free of all material desires, who lives free of material desires, who is without false ego and sense of possessiveness, can really be peaceful. So certainly when one is fully Krishna conscious and is fully taking pleasure in relishing his own relationship with Krishna and giving Krishna to others, then there's peacefulness and tolerance and an ability to remain equipoised even in great difficulties. So these are some of the main qualities of the sadhu. After all, we have to search out the sadhus in order to become attached to them and associate with them. So we have to know what to look for. Now, how do they get these qualities? Interestingly enough, in this verse, it doesn't mention bhakti. That's in the next verse. Also, you see, Mayanannena bhavena bhaktim kurvanti yedvidham matkrite tyakta karmanas tyakta swajana bandhava. Such a sadhu engages in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. For the sake of the Lord, he renounces all other connections, such as family relationships and friendly acquaintances within this world. Okay, we'll read these points. So now this is clearly speaking about a sannyasi who renounces and goes and travels and preaches. So Prabhupada is describing sannyasi. A genuine sannyasi is a sadhu. In other words, not an impersonalist, a devotee. For the sake of service to Krishna, he renounces all connection to home, family, friends, and relatives. This requires tremendous determination. And then Prabhupada talks about, he refers to the verse, Devarshi Bhutapam Ninam Bhatinam Nakinkaronayam Ninicharajan, that we come into this world debtors. We owe the Devas so much, in sending the rain, everything, our entire bodies are connected to the universal form and the Devas, and we require their blessings at every moment just to function in this world. And the rishis, the teachers, we owe them, other living beings, forefathers. So we come into this world full of debts, and we incur more debts. But so how to liquidate them? Simply by serving Krishna, surrendering to Krishna and his pure devotees, then all the debts are liquidated. This is what that verse means. If you simply serve Krishna. Now, this description of the sadhu, we know that, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and so many of Lord Chaitanya's associates and disciples, they were householders. And they were conscientious. They were taking care of their household. Of course, they became temples, but they were taken care of. So what this means is that when the relationships are impediments to devotion, then they have to be cut off. This is sometimes very painful. But if one is able to make one's home into a temple and sacrifice regularly for Krishna and preach and be a devotee, then it's not necessary to renounce these connections. At least not, at the end of life, one should be able to do that. But the thousands and thousands and millions of devotees of Krishna are conscientious householders, and they're preaching also. But the principle, the central principle, is that one has to progressively direct his attachment and deepen his love and attachment for Krishna. And that then one can be a sadhu and give help and instruction to others. So that's Maya Ananyena Bhavena, just to review the Maya Ananyena Bhavena, without deviation, serving me. Bhakti Matkrite Takta Karmanas. For my service will give up any activity. We come to Krishna consciousness, we have so many activities that are outside the realm of devotional service, and we have to give those up in order to enter into the house of bhakti and progress. So this is an important aspect. Now, how do they relish pleasure, transcendental pleasure? That comes up in the next verse. Madashriya kata mrishta shrinvanti katayanti cha tapanti vibadhastapa naitan man katachetasaha. Engage constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. So here, the threefold miseries always plague the conditioned souls. But such miseries, don't disturb a sadhu because his mind is always absorbed in Krishna. And some examples, King Ambarish fully absorbed his mind, body, and words in Krishna, and so was undisturbed when threatened by Durvasa's demon. You know the story. Prahlad Maharaj and Haridas Thakur are other good examples. And this is a very important point because we're living in a material world, a Kali Yuga. As you all know, suddenly we're threatened by this pandemic. Things have become so dangerous. So how do we maintain our equilibrium and do our sadhana and all these different things when there's so much disturbance in society? Well, this is the solution. As I referred to before, Prahlad Maharaj is in his prayer. He says, Naibo Dvijay Padadolatte Abaitaranyas. He says, I am not Udvijay. Udvijay means disturbed. Because I'm already on the other side of the river Vaitavarani. In other words, my consciousness is with you in the spiritual world. He's speaking to Nrsingadev. And at any moment, at any time, I can chant your glories and immerse myself into an ocean of happiness. And he proved it when he was being attacked and tormented by his father and his father's agents, and that he always remained completely fixed on meditation on Krishna. And so he was undisturbed and he was able to come through that trauma successfully. So this is a very important instruction for us, how to remain equipoised, even in so much danger. Learn the art, Manashriya Kata Mrishta. It's interesting that he's describing the kata as ashriya, has taken shelter of me. In other words, those sound vibrations that deal wholly and solely with Krishna, bona fide sound vibrations from Bhagavatam, the holy name, of course, and other literatures. Mrishta, very attractive, very sweet, hearing and chanting. And then the tapas that are inherent in this material world, naitan madgata cetasa, they will not disturb us nearly as much. We can tolerate, we'll be able to tolerate. because our minds will be absorbed in Krishna. Madgata Chetasa. Very important instruction. And we saw that with Srila Prabhupada. How he was able to maintain his determination, his enthusiasm for preaching, and throughout the 12 years, from when he got on that ship and came to America and all the difficulties he undertook, several near-death experiences. But he was equipoised. We saw he was unflappable, and because he is always remembering, and his thoughts are always filled with Krishna's pastimes and activities and instructions. So this is the third verse describing the qualities of the sadhu, who we should search out and hear from. So this is a great instruction for us, because the more we can associate together, either directly or in this time through the internet, and hear Krishna Katha, absorb ourselves, pray together, chant together, we'll be able to transcend the difficulties of the threefold miseries that are always attacking us. So this is so now he kind of sums up, and he says you should search them out. Tayete sadabak sadvi sarvasanga vivarjita sangashte tutate pratya sangadosha harahite. O my mother, O virtuous lady, these are the qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. You must seek attachment to such holy men, for this counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. So I highlighted this from the purport. Prabhupada quotes this phrase. So notice the word sangadosha there, jita sangadosha. This is from Bhagavad Gita 15.5, the chapter about the Supreme Person, beginning with that description of the upside down banyan tree. This whole material world is likened to that. So here, this is the verse, the fifth verse, because he says in the previous verse, one has to cut off this tree by the sword of detachment and search out that person from whom everything has come, and with the aim of going to that place beyond the material world. So that means we have to surrender to the Supreme Person, Krishna. And this verse describes the process of surrender. So the beginning of the verse is 15.5, Nirmana Moha Jita Sanga Dosha. And Prabhupada, he refers to this in the purport, and then he describes how important it is. Entering the kingdom of God entails full surrender to the Lord, the first step of which is becoming, quote, completely freed from the puffed up condition of material possessiveness. Nirmana Moha, Jita Sanga Dosha. So, Nirmana Moha means, of course, without pride, false pride, the illusion of false pride, which is manifest in our sense of me and mine. I am this such and such, and I have so many properties and all of the things that are connected to me. This is the illusion of possessiveness, probably called puffed up condition of material possessiveness. So then it's Jita Sanga Dosha, to conquer over the faults that are the fault of false possessiveness and other faults that come from bad association. In other words, when we come to this material world, we get affected by the modes of material nature, and we associate with so many things and influences in those modes, and this develops our attachments and our fears. And each time we try to fulfill those, we're deepening them, and we're frustrated and developing new attachments. So this is called the fault of faults due to bad association. They can be conquered over by, of course, good association and by the process of surrender. The illusion of I and my, this is point B, is due to our consciousness of being contaminated by the three modes of material nature. Now, this comes up, just to refer to you to this, I just want to keep track of the time here. The teachings of the 9 Yogendras, Vayam Dati Abanabesha Daksad, Ishadapita Sivapayos T. that when we turn away from Krishna and we become absorbed in material energy, fear arises because we've forgotten our real protector. And we're beset by the threefold miseries and so much competition and the frailty of the material body, all the things in the material world that make it impossible to be happy and secure. So association with an attachment for genuine sadhus is point 3, who are sarva sanga vivarjita. That's the second line of the verse. Completely free of all material attachments, purifies one's consciousness of the influence of the material modes. And then I'll end with this quote from the purport. One should therefore give up the association of materialistic persons and seek the association of persons engaged in Krishna consciousness. By their words and instructions, one will be able to cut off one's attachment to material existence. So the most important way of associating with these sadhus, and this will come up in the next verse, is hearing from them. It's a sound vibration, it's the spiritual sound vibration that will purify our consciousness and cut off material attachments and begin to make us attached to Krishna. This is really emphasized in the next verse. So that's what the value is of the association with sadhus. And notice how the word attachment and association are very closely related here. Prabhupada refers in his translation, the great qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. You must seek attachment and seek association with such holy men. For this association with them, which brings attachment to them, counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment and material association. So that Sangha, as you know, Sangha can mean both attachment and association. Sangat sanjayate kama. It's famous second line of verse in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I forget, 260, 61, something like that. And by meditating on the object of the senses, one develops attachment for them. And from that attachment, lust develops. But that second line is often quoted separately to mean by one's association, one develops one's material desires. So by association with the sadhus, these spiritual desires will be developed. Okay, moving on. This is the most quoted of all the verses here, maybe this one in Titikshava Karunika in this series. Satam prasangan mama virya sambido bhavanti ritkana rasayana kataha Tajoshanada Shapavarga Vartmani Shadharati Bhakta Danukamishiti. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed from material attachment, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. This points from the purport. Advancement requires progressive understanding of the personal activities of the Lord. And there's a quote from the purport. To understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees. And by such association, when one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord, the path of liberation is open and he is freed. One who has firm faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes fixed, and his attraction for association with the Lord and the devotees increases. And then the next one I emphasized. Association with devotees means association with the Lord. The devotee who makes this association develops the consciousness for rendering service to the Lord, and then being situated in the transcendental position of devotional service, he gradually becomes perfect. And of course, this is directly in tune with that famous 2 verses by Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the ladder from faith to love, Adar Shraddha Tatak Sadhu-sangastaka bhajana kriya. That's enough faith, if you develop enough faith to come into the association of devotees. And in this day and age, there's so many media we have to rely on. The basic medium is books. When we open Srila Prabhupada's books, we're associating with him in the most important way, through his Vani, through his words. And that association is so enlivening to the soul, purifying, attracts us to Krishna, and gives us subject matter to share when we actually associate personally with devotees or through the internet. So that association can come in many forms. But notice here, when we associate with devotees, it means we're associating with the Lord. because the devotees are going to give you the Lord. They'll speak about, glorify, and join with you in worshiping the Lord in kirtan and all these different things. So now here, this progressive understanding of the personal activities of the Lord, that refers to this word virya samvido, discussion of my powerful activities. That's what that, and it becomes a rasayana, an elixir, which is pleasing to the heart and the ears, kata. By engaging in this activity, one quickly on the path of Apavarga Vartmani. Apavarga is liberation, Vartmani is path. So this is the path to liberation, and one quickly develops Shraddha, faith, Rati, attraction to Krishna, and Bhakti, pure devotion, step by step. So this is the easiest process of yoga, which will come up in the next couple of verses. Okay, I'm sorry we're kind of rushing through this, but I want to get through all 8 verses. So this is the 7th verse. Bhaktya pumanja tevaraga aindriyad jushta shutan madvachananu chintaya chittasya yatto grahane yoga yukto yatishyate vijubhi yoga margai. Thus consciously engaged in devotional service in the association of devotees, a person gains distaste for sense gratification, both in this world and in the next, by constantly thinking about the activities of the Lord. This process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power. When one is actually situated on that path of devotional service, he is able to control the mind. Points from the purport. Attachment to Krishna versus attachment to Maya. This is the whole dynamic that's being discussed here. A, only deep attachment to Krishna, nourished by hearing his pastimes from sadhus, can fully sublimate all material attachments and clear our path back to Godhead. Now this word sublimate, I like to use this. I looked it up in the Oxford English Dictionary to get some more nuances on the meaning. And it's perfect for what we do in Bhakti Yoga, for what the whole process of Bhakti Yoga. It means that the activities of our senses, of our mind, of our whole being is purified and taken from the mundane and absorption and attachment to matter to absorption and attachment to Krishna, to the divine. That's literally what sublimate means. The same activities are sublimated when they become sacred in connection to Krishna. And the easiest way to connect to Krishna is through the ear, through the sound vibration. And here specifically is discussing Virya Samvido, the discussion of Krishna's pastimes. So we have these 4 things: the name, the form, the qualities, and the pastimes. And they're all subject matter of hearing and chanting. And by absorbing ourselves in those, we quickly developed faith and attachment and love for Krishna. Here, B, hearing and chanting Krishna's name and descriptions of his form, qualities, and pastimes among sadhus is therefore the easiest process. Vijubir yoga marga. Vijubir literally means easy, and yoga marga is, of course, the path of yoga. The easiest process for absorbing the mind in him and becoming fixed in vairagya. It's very important. That's why if you just come to, a gathering of devotees and you read Prabhupada's books together and you discuss them, this is a great example of the easiest way to perform, have sadhu sangha. And of course, you can, also get association now with the internet through, sannyasis and others who can give you classes. So, but we need to reject material association and take spiritual association. Quote from the purport. There are different processes of yoga marga, attaining yoga perfection, but devotional service to the Lord is the easiest. Not only is it the easiest process, but the result is sublime. Prabhupada uses that word sublime. Everyone, therefore, should try to take up this process of Krishna consciousness and reach the highest perfection of life. And you can see Prabhupada works so hard to found the ISKCON. We just celebrated the founding date, right, recently. And to establish, worked so hard, the Bombay Temple, it was a whole, amazing story which is being told and published soon by Giriraj Swami. How, so much battle to get that land and to build the temple. Why? To give a place where devotees can come together, worship the deity, be in a sanctified atmosphere, and hear about Krishna from devotees, from the sadhus. It's so important in this age because there's so many distractions. that this place environment, that's why living in a holy place, making your home a holy place, deciding, being very careful with the sound vibrations that are vibrated there. This is how you can advance quickly. So we have one more verse. Here it is. Asevayayam pakate gunanam jnanena vairagya vijimbitena yogena mayarpitaya cha bhaktya mam praktigatmanami havarundi. Thus, by not engaging in the service of the modes of material nature, but by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge and renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in this very life, for I am the Supreme Personality, the Absolute Truth. Lord Kapiladeva speaking as Krishna. Points from the purport. Association with sadhus leads to association with Krishna. 1. A. Full engagement in devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting about Krishna among devotees, protects one from contamination by the modes of nature. B. Lord Chaitanya approved the process of hearing Krishna's glories from sadhus as the foundation of developing love of Godhead. Jnane priyasam eva. Now we won't get into this whole thing. This is Prabhupada's referring here to this discussion with Ramananda Roy, in which in the 8th chapter of Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which Lord Chaitanya took the role of the student and Ramananda Roy as the guru. He was reluctant to do that, but Lord Chaitanya convinced him. And so there's a series of, he asked, well, what the classic question, what is the goal of life and what is the process to achieve it? So Ramananda begins with the Varnashrama. Varnashram is the best way, giving up these, then Lord Chaitanya, that's okay, but it's external. Go on. And he got, Yat Karoshi Yadishnasi, sacrificing everything. In other words, he goes quickly one after another. And Lord Chaitanya rejects it as external, even to the point of Sarva Dharma Parityajya, which we won't get into. But then when Ramananda Roy chants this verse, which is one of Brahma's prayers to Lord Krishna in the Brahma Vimohan Leela, the 14th chapter, 10th canto, Jnane Priyasamudapasyanamanta Eva. Give up all attempts to understand on your own through speculation. That's Jnani Priyasa, Udapasya. And the mantra eva jivanti sanmukaditam bhavadiya vartam stani chitak shuddhigatam. Follow the path of hearing from the great sages. How does you mukaditam bhavadiya vartam stani chitak shuddhigatam to navanmanov. Jivanti sanmukaditam. Sat means refers to the sadhus, the devotees. From the mouth of the sadhus, that is emanating your glories, then you listen to that. Stay in your home. Don't do anything radical. But follow this path, Shuddhigatam. But then there's this key phrase, Tanuvan Manobir, with your body, mind, and words. In other words, not just in one ear and out the other, but when you hear some instructions, you carry them out with your body. Mind, you contemplate them and think about them. And with your words, you repeat them. If you follow this path, you can conquer the unconquerable Lord. He who is otherwise unconquerable. How do you conquer? By developing love. Krishna is only conquered by love. So this is the foundation of the whole process that we've been given, is systematic hearing and coming under the guidance of a sadhu, guru, so that we can purify our existence. And then all the hearing and the chanting becomes more and more and more relishable, so that what used to be an austerity becomes the greatest joy. Chanting the holy name. You don't want to stop. How much nectar this name Krishna has produced. I want to have millions of mouths. Rupa Goswami, millions of ears, he says. What to speak, hearing Krishna's pastimes, the time disappears. It's such a wonderful, enjoyable experience. So when that comes, that great eagerness to hear. There's another verse later on by Kapiladeva. This is a sign of real purity of devotion beyond the modes of nature. When the mind flows toward Krishna Katha eagerly, just as the Ganges flows into the sea at Gangasagara, you can't stop it. It's so powerful flow. So that's what we try, the development by association with sadhus. Okay, is it time for questions? Ananda Goranga.
We still have a few more minutes, Prabhu.
Okay.
If you can do a nice wrap-up of the 8 that we just
Yes,
covered.
I can do a review. So we begin prasangam madhanam pashamatma kaviyovidu, that those who are intelligent, they understand that these powerful ropes of attachment, madhanam pasham means strong ropes, and prasangam, those attachment ropes has to be transferred to the sadhus. Then the question, who is the sadhu? He gives 3 verses describing tolerant, full of compassion, friend to all living beings, has no enmity toward any living being, and abides by the Shastra. And all of this develops because he's very strong, determined devotion to me without deviation. In other words, pure devotee. And if whatever he has to give up in terms of activities, he does it, certain things to do and certain things to give up. And even relationships that may be very dear, but if they're impediments, he'll give those up also. Then what is the basic activity? Hearing and chanting those delightful descriptions of my name, form, qualities, and pastimes. And because of absorption in hearing and chanting and remembering me, the threefold miseries practically are, completely tolerable. It's very equipoise in that it can tolerate, doesn't even bother. And then it says, my dear mother, Tahite Sadhavak Sadhvi, you have to search out these devotees who are free of material attachment, because by their association, you will be able to get free of the faults that you have obtained from bad association in the past. In other words, you become purified. And then this wonderful verse, Satam Prasangan. Notice the word prasanga there. The Ashtaka began with prasanga. Means intense, meaningful attachment or an association. So now materialists have all of that intense attraction and association with material things. But that same attachment and association has to be directed toward the satams, the sadhus. So satam prasangan mama virya samvido. You'll hear descriptions of my activities. Bhavanti Ritkana, which is like a life-giving elixir for the heart and the ears, Ritkana Rasayana Kata. And by engaging in this activity, one Tadjoshanat, quickly along the path of liberation, one deepens one's faith and develops rati, or real attraction, culminating in pure bhakti or devotion. Then the next verse, he says, in this way, bhakti apamanjata viraga, one develops viraga or vairagya, not only for those things that you can immediately see, the temptations of sense gratification, but the temptations of trying to go to the heavenly planets and enjoy. Drishta Shutan. How? Madvachanana Chintaya, by thinking about my activities, including the creation and Krishna's involvement in those things also. That's Vachanana Chintaya. And in this way, one can easily control the mind, practicing this easiest process of yoga. And finally, he says, asevayayam prakate gunanam, thus not serving the modes of nature and developing deeper and deeper knowledge and detachment. And through bhakti yoga, offering everything to me, one achieves my association in this very lifetime. In other words, one becomes fully self-realized even before leaving this body. One can experience Krishna at every step in one's life. So that's a quick review of the Sadhu-sangastaka. Time for a question or two?
Yes, Prabhu, wonderful. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, the translation, we get to know so much. And then when we read the Nectarian Purports by Srila Prabhupada, we get, 100 times more about the actual translation. And when we hear classes from you, which is like a purport on the purport, we go so much more deeper, and we are able to really understand what is the real meaning of these wonderful verses. So thank you so much, Prabhu. So we have a few questions. So we have about 10 minutes. If it's okay, we have at least 3 questions now. So the first question is, there was a reference to liberation here. So we all know that we've heard that there are 5 kinds of liberation: Salokya, Shasti, Samipya, Sarupya, and Sayujya. So out of that, What is the best kind of, is there one of the best type of liberations? We've heard that Sayujya is not the one that devotees go after. So is there a preference? Yeah.
Well, okay, so maybe you're referring to Satam Pasangan verse?
Yeah.
They talk Apavarga Vartmani. Apavarga means liberation. I won't go into the details of how each word, So traditionally, it's described, especially Gaudiya Vaishnavas, who are always aiming for reinstatement in Goloka Vrindavan, is that liberation becomes insignificant. That's why we hear, Lord Chaitanya is teaching us in the Shikshashtaka. Nadanang, nadanang, nasundini. Here's what I'm not praying for. I'm not praying for wealth, not praying for followers, not praying for beautiful spouse or great learning. And I'm not praying for liberation because I'm saying birth after birth. What am I praying for? Pure devotion to you, ahoitiki, without any material motivation. So the desire for liberation is really categorized as a material motivation. But it's an important impetus, especially in the beginning of bhakti, to get us on the spiritual path and keep us enlivened. I like to give the analysis. Prabhupada would always talk about that. Is about the threefold miseries and birth and death, and we don't want to take another birth, because we have like two impetuses for acting in Krishna consciousness, right? We have a really strong impetus for acting in Maya consciousness, and that is our conditioning and our built-in attraction of the sense objects. But what keeps us going in devotional service? Well, one is this understanding right at the beginning of the Gita that we are souls, we're not bodies. We're pure spirit souls. So being absorbed in bodily consciousness, which Arjuna was, and then he became miserable because he couldn't solve his problem, is the source of our problem. So understanding the need for breaking free of this bodily consciousness and the miseries of birth and death, this should get us on the path, because we really want to be free of that. But it can't keep us on the path, ultimately. We need Krishna's all attractiveness. So from the front, Krishna's attractiveness, the beautiful smile, you come to the temple, you see the deities, you hear the Leela, and the festivals. These attract us. But also, we should keep and from behind, there's Durga to remind us if we lose, if we deviate with her trident, with those threefold miseries. Hey, if you don't become Krishna conscious, you have to take another birth and suffer. So that liberation ultimately is not something devoted that Gaudiya Vaishnavas really strive for. The famous verse by Bilamangal Thakur in his Krishna Karnamrita, Bhaktis Vayis Jadatada Bhagavan Nidisa Taivena Nakpadati Divvikashora Murti Mukti Swayam Mukulitanjali Sevatesman Dharmartha Kama Katayaksamiya Patiksha. My dear Lord, if I become fixed in pure devotion to you, then I'll be able to taste the fruit of that. Is it liberation? No. It's the vision of your beautiful adolescent form. In other words, you'll reveal that most attractive form to me. And as far as Mukti is concerned, she's waiting at the doorway with the the Anjali, Pushpanjali. This Anjali is, how can I serve you? And as far as whatever I need of Dharma, Artha, and Kama, they're also there waiting to serve. In other words, it comes in the train. Just develop your pure attraction to Krishna, and you'll experience liberation even in this lifetime. Jivan Mukta, Uchate. So therefore, those four kinds of liberation. Now, Kapiladeva speaks of them later on, and he says that what to speak of, merging, that's not even in consideration. But the others, they are compatible with bhakti, especially in Vaikuntha, to be on the same planet, to have the same form, to have the same opulence, to have the constant association. They're not opposed to bhakti, but devotees would never aspire for them without bhakti. That's the verse which I won't try to dredge up now. There's a verse that these 5 liberations, devotees will never consider outside of bhakti. And if they're really absorbed in bhakti, they're not really aspiring for them. If Krishna gives them like association, okay, fine, we'll take it. It's needed. But what they really want is the opportunity to serve, even birth after birth, as Lord Chaitanya says. As long as we can serve Krishna and be absorbed in thought of him, then anywhere you want to put me, Krishna, okay, fine. That's the ultimate attitude of the pure devotees. So I hope that
yes, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So we have 3 more questions in the next few minutes, if we can cover that. One is a very practical question from one of the devotees sent privately. What advice could you give to people who have interest in discovering scriptures, but they are attached to mundane activities, example, going to cinemas, they sort of covered by the modes?
Yeah. Well, that's what that's what this whole Sadhu-sangastaka is about. In other words, the most valuable thing such a person have is some interest in the Shastra. In other words, there's that. And one wants to maximize that. But really, you need to visit the temple, participate, find some service that you can do, practical service, because all of these things clean the heart. What do they clean the heart of? The attraction to Maya. In other words, one becomes more inclined to be amongst the devotees and see the beautiful form of the deity and chant the holy name. That becomes a more prominent desire. It's really a war of our, within our heart. We've developed so many of these material desires in different modes of nature. Maybe in the mode of goodness, I like to go out and do something in the forest and bird watch or something, but still, that's material desire. That'll keep us coming back also. And goodness is never pure. It can be affected by passion, and so it's very dangerous. So those the advice I have is read the books, try to find, make friends with a devotee you can relate to and you can contact, and as many times as possible, visit the temple and try to establish even a small amount of sadhana, regular sadhana in your life. I began with 2 rounds. I'm chanting 2 rounds of Hare Krishna. This is back in 1972. I had a full-time job in this hospital, and I would chant my rounds in the morning, and I was living alone, which helped, and did some little hatha yoga and went off to work. Now, admittedly, I was also reading Bhagavad Gita, doing work and everything. But basically, I was doing a little bit of sadhana. I would visit the temple on the weekends like that. So the whole idea is to open up the part of your life that has to do directly with Krishna consciousness and gradually give up material things. That's my best advice on it.
Wonderful, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Prabhu, going back to the first verse that you covered out of the 8 wonderfully well, which is, I think, the 20th verse, Prasangam Ajaram Pasam verse. So it discusses about the ropes of attachment. So now for different families or different individuals, the ropes may be different. It could be small rope, big rope, thick rope, etc. So what we mean is, some of them may be attached to their family. Some of them may be attached to bad habits, like the pillars of sin, which is much worse. So do we have a gradation of attachment, and is certain things sort of tolerable or better, or none?
Well, yeah. I mean, to be attached to one of the sinful principles is a big impediment, and that has to be worked on. Is a very important aspect of in order to be freed. And we shouldn't minimize the power of prayer. Prabhupada said this Hare Krishna mantra should be uttered prayerfully. That we're calling out to Krishna, please pick me up, engage me in your service. That's the basic idea or mood that we should have. Because we should read and understand the dangers of pursuing these sinful attachments, or any material attachments, especially gross sinful element. It's very, very, it covers the consciousness and really makes it impossible to advance in devotional service. So we need to pray very hard to be able to give up the gross sins. And then, there's so many other prayers, that we can deepen our attachment to Krishna, to association with devotees. And so that prayerfulness is a very important first step. And that's also a sign of what your real desire is. A prayer is an utterance of a desire And it's not, it may be struggling amongst all these other material desires, but at least that desire is there. And it's just like you have a garden, Lord Chaitanya used the analogy of the seed in the heart. So you have a garden in your heart, and there's so many weeds and so many, things that you want to, which weren't there. But there's also this little delicate creeper of devotion that's been planted. There's something there. So we have to become gardeners for our heart, and we have to, starve the weeds by not feeding them. And when you indulge in these things, then you water them and you give fertilizer. But if you don't indulge, then they become weak and they're easier to pull up and give up entirely. And nourish the bhakti creeper by as much association as possible and hearing and chanting, especially chanting Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So maybe we can wrap it up with one last question. I think
Sure.
this is you nicely explained about the debts that we are born with. I think it's the third verse. I'm not sure, Prabhu. That you mentioned about the Devarsi Bhutanta.
Yeah, he refers to the verse of the purport. I don't think he quotes the Sanskrit, but it's obvious he's talking.
Right. So in this verse, you nicely described how one can liquidate the debts to all the devatas as well if we serve the Lord and watering the root of the tree, etc. Now, yatataror mulana. Now, is when we worship Lord Krishna, it automatically liquidates the debts that we owe to everybody, Deva, Bhutas, etc. Now, should the consciousness, will the consciousness have an impact? What the question is, Prabhu, should the person who's performing this devotional service also consciously realize that the devatas and everyone is within Lord Krishna, so when you serve Lord Krishna, everyone is satisfied? Or even if he's got no knowledge of that, will the impact be there? Because he may still be fearful because of others saying, oh, you didn't do this to this demigod, etc. So should he have that knowledge to gain the full impact of devotional service, which will offset any of his debts?
Yeah, okay. First of all, the verse itself, Devarshi Bhutabhyam Nakinkara Munichara, Sarvatmanayak Sharanam Shadanyam Gato Mukundam Pariritikartam. I think that's the third and fourth line, right? Yeah. That's so the actual liquidation of all those debts is not just to worship, but it really says Sarvatmanayak Sharanam Sharanam, to take shelter of someone who's taken shelter of Krishna with all one's being. In other words, you really get free when you're fully surrendered. And but to along the path toward that full surrender, one is also becoming free of the debts. It's a process. Just like they become liquidated when you become a pure devotee. There's no question of any debts. But even before that, you're certainly freed of sinful reactions. I mean, one of the verses I read in the CC was that just by chanting one name, of course, offenselessly, one liquidates all one's, sinful reactions. So it's a process, and one doesn't have to be aware. I mean, I certainly wasn't aware for a long time, and when I practiced devotional service, that I'm becoming, free from my karma and all of these technical aspects. I certainly felt, much freer because I was free from the attachments that are part of the sinful reaction. When you're obsessed with some material attachment, whatever it may be, that in itself is a sinful reaction, because obviously that's going to lay the foundation for more entanglement, more sin, and the whole thing goes on. So when you and it's a kind of liberation when your vairagya grows, through bhakti as the part of this Sadhu-sangastaka. You feel free. You feel freer. Then you realize that all of these attachments causing you so much anxiety. These are the ropes. You feel that those ropes have been slackened or even cut, and that in itself is a sense of liberation. So it doesn't depend on your knowing the list of all the debts that it's just like you've consolidated them. Like if you have a lot of debts, the credit card, so you consolidate it all to one payment, right? One payment a month, and then you don't get calls from here and there, and your anxiety level goes down. Just meet that one payment, and you can get rid of it. So that one payment is watering the root of the trees, you put it, serving Krishna, and fully surrendering. Madashriya Gato Mukundam, that really is one has gone to Mukunda through surrender. But it's a spectrum. It's a process. It's not, and it doesn't necessarily depend on you knowing how it's working. Just like you don't know how a medicine's going to work, but it works. You know how it's working in your body. So Krishna consciousness is just you just follow the process, and you get the result. And then it helps to know, because that keeps you determined. That there's the more that when you know the foundations and you know the philosophy, then it keeps your determination strong.
Beautiful,
and your faith strong too.
Very nicely answered, Prabhu. So very clear. So thank you so much, Prabhu. So on this note, we'd like to also thank all the devotees who joined us, especially devotees from Mauritius as well, who had joined today's session. And talking about Mauritius, we're so happy that we will have Dravida Prabhu again with us next Sunday. And the following Sunday, which is 2nd of August, we are happy to inform you that His Holiness Sundara Chaitanya Goswami, who just became a Maharaj a few days ago, will be joining us live from Mauritius as well, not next Sunday, but the following Sunday. So we're all eagerly awaiting His Grace Dravida Prabhu's class again next Sunday. So until then, please be safe, and Hare Krishna to everyone. Hare Krishna.